So everyone's been talking recently about a new update to the Dota 2 matchmaking sort of immortal draft system. So I want to go and talk about it here, make a video about it, see what and I'll tell you guys what I think about it and sort of what's the general feeling amongst the community. So a recent update came out where immortal draft rules were changed, and that was kind of seen as okay. Basically, it used to be that Immortal Draft was used at 6,500 MMR and above. Now it's 8,500 MMR and above. So it moves up by 2,000. So if you don't know what Immortal Draft is, it's when we have the two highest MMR players in a lobby. They pick players and then you play the game normally. And it's a bit difficult. Like, people haven't really been loving it as much because when you go in, you can sort of say, "Oh, I want to be carry," but there could be like four carries in the lobby, and it becomes hard for the captains to pick because it doesn't take into account roles. You know, when you queue, you can pick the role you want. Immortal Draft doesn't care. When you go in, you can highlight, but it can put you in a lobby with literally 9 supports, and games feel a bit more roulette-y in that situation. So now that problem has sort of been pushed from 6.5 to 8.5. That's interesting that they're going with this route. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. And if any one player is above 8,500 MMR, the match counts as an immortal draft regardless. So it doesn't have to be like an average, just one guy is there. That's all you need to do. They also changed the way MMR gain and loss works in that system. This has also been something, when immortal draft happens, in general, MMR in Dota is that if one team has more MMR than the other team, if the team with higher MMR wins, they get less, and if they lose more. So a lot of times you're incentivized to be on the lower MMR team. And by lower, it doesn't have to be by much. We're not talking about like your 6,000 versus 8,000. We're talking about, 6.2 versus 6.4, where it's a very small gap. It's not even a gap, to be honest with you. So what often used to happen was when captains go into Mortal Draft, they pick the lowest MMR player by turns. It's like, oh, I take the lowest MMR, then he takes the lowest, and I take the second lowest, and then we keep going that way. So they've changed it. It doesn't tell you how they've changed it. They've just been like, we've changed it. And you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. Overall, Immortal Draft still remains somewhat problematic, and I don't know if this is sort of pushing the problem. We're saying, oh, we're no longer affecting this many people with a problem. We're affecting this many people with a problem. I think it needs more of an overhaul. I don't feel like this is enough. I don't know. The problems with the Mortal Draft remains. They just affect the lower amount of people. Now, this has generally been something where people are like, yeah, okay, it's changed, whatever. The bigger issue has been this, that Immortal Draft games no longer show up in public match history. And these games are not listed in web APIs. What this means is that your games no longer are like saved in Dota Buff, saved in other websites that take data if you're a high enough MMR. And if you go into, like, if you want to see a pro player play and crash the replays, you can't do that anymore. It's limited to the people who actually played in the match only. And this is the one that's been bugging a lot of people. People are like, well, hey, I want to see, Yatoro play carry. He's above 8.5. He's 16,000. How am I going to watch him? You can only watch him on his stream, or you can only watch him live because it's not a replay. Remember, it only says replay access is restricted, not live access. So if he's playing, you can tune in and watch, and you can also catch him in tournaments. So those are like 3 only options. Some people are talking about in the olden days when people used to sell replays of themselves back before we have that. If I'm playing against Ame and people want to know what Ame is playing, then it's like, oh, do you have a replay of how Ame plays? And I can give it to them or sell it to them or things like that. People have been really annoyed by this change, and I honestly find it somewhat interesting that they did that. But the Valve has issued their reasons for it, which is that they want players to have a nickname for it. You can see it right here. You have to have an official nickname. What this is for is so that people smurf less. It's like, oh, you're above 8.5, have an official name, play it, and your history is going to be private. We don't want other people to see your what you're practicing. Cool, no problem. Your history is going to be private. It's an interesting fix, but I don't think that this will stop people from smurfing unless they change their name. I don't know. It's a whole odd change. Now, there has been some interesting reactions from people. A lot of them don't like it. I've heard a lot of talent don't like this change. They've all been complaining about it, but I've also heard from the Astini, who is the who's the coach for Paravision, and they're like really doing really well. And he had a very interesting sort of take on it, where he's saying, "Yo, guys, it is becoming this thing where anytime I practice, when one of my players practices a hero, it becomes public knowledge within a couple of days, and then it becomes unviable in a tournament." And he was saying, "Oh, look at 9 class. 9 class, you can check his last 25 games. You can see he's picking Venomancer, Night Stalker, position 4. You go in a tournament, you ban Venomancer, you ban Night Stalker, and suddenly a lot of his practice time is wasted." And I kind of like that. Was a good take to me. Because it's like, yes, I'm doing all these unusual things, and now people just get access to it within a couple of days. They know instantly the item build and the skill build I'm using. Maybe they're not so good with the macro play here and there, but they know what is overall coming. And I thought that was a very interesting approach there. So I kind of agree that having all your information available all the time to other people can hinder you as a player. So that's cool. I don't know. In general, I'm not as bothered by this change. I will say something for us as talent who work for this. A lot of times what you do is they ask you, "What do you think of this player?" You go to their history, you see what they've been playing for the last couple of months, you compile the list of heroes, you write them down, and that's your data, that's your research. And you can't do that anymore, which makes it a lot more interesting to see how people are going to adapt, like for us on the talent side in the, when we present the show for you guys. That's going to be kind of different. But overall, I think that there's going to be a little bit of changes coming in some time. Maybe not within a couple of months, maybe a little bit more. Then Valve will say like, "Oh, yo, we're going to change a little bit of this and that, and we'll see how it goes." Some websites that have monetized themselves entirely on Dota 2 data are going to be suffering for this for a while. That's going to be odd to see. We know like Dota Buff, Dota 2 Pro Tracker, a lot of their data is based on the best players, and that's gonna be tough. But yeah, this is just kind of my update on this. Let me hear what you guys think about it. I'd be love to respond. And if you like what you're seeing, then just like and follow the channel. Thank you very much. Bye bye.